don't know if you've noticed, but it's Euro 2016. What was the largest amount matched in Euro 2012? I think the answer will surprise you if you're used to trading football in traditional markets like the Premiership or the La Liga or variants therein or thereof. If you want to find out, watch the rest of this video. Thank you for watching this video, which will continue in a moment. I just wanted to say, don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. More subscribers we get, the more videos I'll post. Also, why not comment on them? But most of all, don't forget to visit betangel.com and download a free trial of BetAngel. We've got a very busy user forum there and also a blog that contains a lot of my work over a number of years. So yeah, visit betangel.com. Meanwhile, back to the video. So yeah, what was the biggest amount? I have it on my paper here. I remember it very well actually. And necessarily it was the final, which is what you'd expect. But on the final, there was £103 million matched on the final in Euro 2012. And if you look at the way that that was broken down, there was 43 million matched before the start of the match. You can give or take a few figures here because there's a bit of crossover in terms of how stuff is accounted for. When you look at the official stats that come off of this, some of it may be in play, some of it may be pre-off, and there's a mixture depending upon how the market was created and formed and executed. But if you use the official stats, which is what I'm using here, 43 million was matched before the off, 58 million in play. And in fact, that actually stood out quite well above some of the other matches. So if you go down to the next match, it was 63 million, 60, 60, 56, 50, blah, 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 blah. And, you know, basically the message I'm sending to you here is it's big. And that's typically what you would expect in the World Cup or the Euros. Numbers do get pretty big. As I go down this list, you start looking at fixtures, nondescript fixtures at the beginning of the tournament. And you're talking, you know, just double checking this before I say it. Yeah, you're looking at about sort of 10 million at the very low end of the market. And it generally goes between 10 million up to the 100 million, but typically clusters around 15 to 20 million per match. Now, one of the significant elements of this is that before the off, you're going to be looking at sort of 5 to 10 million on most matches. And that makes the pre-off markets very interesting to participate in their own right. You don't often get that with traditional football trading. You tend to find that it's only televised matches that really get massive volume. But of course, the major championships, they're all televised in one way or another, and there's always active interest in the markets. So trading pre-off is actually a good place to be. It takes a lot of time and patience, but as the money begins to flood into the market, you'll be able to take advantage of that. Everybody will have an opinion on England, may need to lay them, but actually that's not true, because what you tend to find is the price in England tend to shorten overall before the match gets underway. You always have this, you know what, we could win this scenario playing in people's heads, and typically that manifests itself as people backing the favourite. So, you know, putting that to one side, you do tend to get pretty stable, big pre-off markets all of the time. I'll just check actually to see what the biggest England match was. It must have been against Italy, I suspect, which it was, yeah, so 60 million matched before the Italy match. If I run down, Sweden was 30 million, Ukraine was 23 million, 22 million. So on average, you can see the England matches were much higher up. And of course, this year, we've got a lot of interest from across the UK and Ireland. So that is going to add, you know, that's going to be pretty beneficial, because when you look at Betfair and exchange usage across Europe, you know, there's a peak in Spain and Portugal, but also in Ireland and in the UK. So necessarily matches that revolve around that are going to generate a lot more liquidity than some of the smaller countries where betting and exchange activity is somewhat curtailed. So yeah, you will necessarily see a lot of activity in and around those areas. But even minor markets tend to perform pretty well. If I look down this list, you know, there's enormous amounts of money all over the place for many different types of markets. Total goals, which is a market that is generally quite quiet, you know, we've got hundreds of thousands of pounds matched on here. But yeah, there's loads of interesting markets to participate on. And if you go back to my blog and you look at the World Cup, in 2014, I had to think about that. You'll see that I was actively trading the markets before the off and produced some pretty good results. And the benefit of doing that is you can then carry that over in play and do something interesting with it and multiply that number up at no risk. You've made your money, you can't possibly lose, so why not just throw it in the market and do a couple of interesting things with it? That works pretty well. Now, if you look at the way that the tournament progresses, the problem that I have with a lot of tournaments, when you're looking at, say, the winner of the tournament market, is that a lot of tournaments are seeded so that the better teams, the better players in tennis, for example, meet in the latter stages. And that distorts the market. That makes it very difficult for you to place a bet on some outsider and expect them to come through. So, if you expect Iceland to do a Leicester and go on and win it at ridiculous odds, the chance of that occurring is much, much lower, because they're going to have to not battle just getting out of the group stages. They're going to have a difficult round of the next round, and then the quarters and the semis. They're going to meet difficult teams all the way along. They're going to have to perform miracles all the time. So it becomes much harder. It's the same in tennis. To get a complete outsider winning a tennis tournament is extremely rare, because all of the seeds are geared up to meet in those latter stages. And that's the way it works in seeded tournaments. However, if you want to take an angle on that, what you tend to find is in tournaments where they used to all be knockout tournaments, but now they have these group stages to generate more interest stroke revenue. And then that holds people's interest for a bit longer. There's nothing worse than qualifying for a tournament and getting knocked out straight away, so the group stages are quite helpful for that. But a trade that I've noticed that's been working particularly well for a number of years now is opposing very short-priced teams in to qualify out of the group stages. So you'll very often get teams that have incredibly heavy odds on to escape the group stages and go into the knockout competition, and it's typically those that produce most of the value, either backing an outsider or typically laying a team at very, very short odds. And every tournament you'll see a team get knocked out at the group stages that you wouldn't have guessed would have been that you just wouldn't have thought that would have happened a lot of the time. But the advantage you get from a trading perspective is if they draw their first match 0-0 and they have a bit of a cagey situation going on there, or perhaps they concede an own goal or something like that, those to qualify odds will shift dramatically. So you get the opportunity to trade out in a number of different scenarios. So that's quite an interesting play that you can do at the Euros or most major tournaments, is looking to oppose those teams at very short odds to qualify for the group stages. That seems to work pretty well. The other thing about tournaments like this is there's a massive incentive to score. So looking for unusual situations, late goals or strange comebacks and so on and so forth tends to get very heightened during these knockout tournaments. Unusual events do and can occur much more frequently than you would suspect. And if you get teams that are equally matched, then the matches can tend to be a bit cagey. But teams that have no ambitions necessarily of qualifying for the knockout stages, have got nothing to lose, so they may just go for it, and the situation may develop very favourably from a trading perspective from there. The only thing I would say about these tournaments is because they're only occurring every 4 years, or every 2 years if you say World Cup Euros and so on, there is actually a lack of really good quality data from these tournaments from an exchange perspective. So you can work on the stats in terms of amount of goals likely to be scored and so on and so forth there. But in terms of how that translates into how the odds have been set and how they've traded, it's actually a little bit harder during these sort of tournaments to do something decisively. And the reason I say that is that I just simply don't have enough data in terms of how the market is likely to behave and the level of overreaction or not at certain stages. So that makes it a little bit harder. So I'm just throwing in a bit of caution there for you to sort of say it's not like the Premier League. It's not like an FA Cup or so on and so forth. All I'm trying to do is throw a contrast in for you there to make you aware of that. But also bear in mind, all of these are on neutral ground. So I'm really good at pricing a match when there's home advantage and other factors are in play in the domestic league. But when it comes to these neutral grounds, it's a little bit harder to price that in and make an accurate judgment. Now there's probably an opportunity there but it's not one that I've particularly discovered or will aggressively go for. It's just that little bit harder. And also, if you look at the way the tournament works and where the games are being played, you may actually have quite strong support for one team or another based upon where that location is. So, you know, that's something I'm looking at and researching a bit deeper. But in terms of, because the exchanges are only around in June 2000, and, you know, there haven't been sufficient liquidity for a few years after that, you know, you can pull stats out, but you have to draw a little question mark over the relevance and the divergence to mean that could occur within the limited data set that you have. So I'm slightly less confident that I will get the pricing right on these sort of matches. So I'll go for more general strategies, but also I'll take advantage of the liquidity there. It's much easier to get bigger positions in because you can take those positions out if required. Volume is absolutely massive. So yeah, hopefully that's given you a few hints there as to how you may want to trade that. As the tournament progresses, I'll have a look at a few other things as well and give you an update on the blog and via various other mediums. If I find something interesting or there's something that I'm going to do in there, then that can make up another video in a week or two's time. So yeah, other than laying England, hopefully that's given you a few suggestions as to what to expect and what to do at Euro 2016. If you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and subscribe, or even comment on the video if you wish. The more you do that, the more videos I can produce. But also don't forget to visit betangel.com and download a free trial.